freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's RBC Canadian Open, joined to break it all down by, Sia Nejad. Hello, Sia.
Hello, Rick. I was just discussing with Troy how, it was tough to watch Denny lose, but it was great to watch Victor win. And I thought, Denny let one slip through his fingers. We're not sure how many he's going to have, but it's nice to have $2.2 million in your pocket for second place. For I don't think he choked. Victor came and grabbed it from him, but that was kind of tough to watch and really cool to watch at the same time yesterday.
Yeah, if you're gonna finish second somewhere, you might as well do it at one of the big events, right? Obviously, he wants more than that, but when you're Denny McCarthy, that finishing position probably checks off a lot of like what your season goals are going to end up being about, like securing your card and making X amount of dollars, like all that fun stuff. So we'll see. New challenge ahead of us this week before we go to LA for the US Open, and even more of a challenge, Sia, because we've never played at Oakdale before. So we're going to do kind of a lot of wild speculation of how we think this golf course is going to play, what it's going to look like, who it might benefit, and all that fun stuff. So we've got some work ahead of us today.
We definitely have some work ahead of us. And it is going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be completely speculative because we have sort of the dimensions of the course and hole by hole and things of that nature. But this is tough. We have no course history to go on. We have tournament history, which doesn't really mean a ton. I think you can imply certain things from other sort of similar tournaments that had similar course setups for the RBC Canadian. But yeah, this is going to be one where, it might be a good thing ultimately, Rick, because I think what it might allow us to do is maybe fade the prevailing narratives, and we might have a narrative too, but to fade those prevailing narratives and maybe go with some guys, some less chalky guys that are going to end up sort of passing everybody in your DFS lineups.
Yeah, because I guess the idea being that no one knows. So of most weeks, wouldn't you prefer to be pivoting more frequently in a week where no one knows than in a week where everyone at least thinks they know?
That's exactly right. And the thing is, and I want to be like super clear here, because your pivot could be a pivot just in general in terms of the type of player you want, or you could agree with the prevailing narratives, but then just still have a couple of pivots in your lineup. I don't want people to be confused and think, especially in your GPP lineups, your tournament lineups, you got to pivot 6 out of 6. I mean, to really get your lineup going, maybe you take a few chalky guys and you take maybe one or two kind of pivoty guys. So that's just something to consider as you're considering some of the guys that you'll love this week.
Well, before we get down to business, let me remind everyone listening that the one and done selection form for you, the fans, that is live now. There's a link in the description. You can enter your pick for this week, $9 million purse, a little bit top heavy at the top of the board. And you can get involved and continue your chase to catch up and chase down Mark Immelman. We'll be going live Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time for the mega preview pod, and we will reveal the selections then. Oakdale Golf and Country Club. Troy, if you want to share my screen, I've got the scorecard here. We've never played competitively here at Oakdale, and the RBC Canadian Open in general moves around a lot. We'll play here this year, and I believe they also have it on the schedule for 2026, but we're taking as much information as we can find anecdotally on the internet, Google, or whatever you want to do to try to figure this place out.
Yeah. And so one thing to consider here is we've got 3 par 3s, 3 par 5s. What does that leave us with? By the way, 2 of the 3 par 5s are incredibly short. So, I mean, I think all of these are reachable. I think par 5 scoring might be something you want to take a peek at for sure, but a lot of short par 4s. So I think what that means, Rick, and again, I'm not the authority on this. I'm in sort of speculation mode, but I certainly think what you're looking at here is a lot of wedges coming in on your second shot. So while I'm going to be looking at a lot of weighted approach via rrg.com, it's that wedge play, 75 to 150-ish, 75 to 125 that I think is going to be a little bit more important here than at other venues.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, just kind of rolling through this. Here's, some of the par 4s, 379, 384, 354, 367, 424, 419, 398, 432. that's like 8 holes, nearly half the holes that are very likely driver wedge of some type.
Yeah. So Rick, I got to ask you though, when it comes to the driver, like I don't know how to parse this when it comes to what I think, and we'll find out as the days kind of go by, of course, how rough, how penal the rough is. But I'm just curious, is it going to be a lot of driver or is it going to be a lot of like positional? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm asking you.
I think it'll be dealer's choice, right? This course isn't long enough to box out the short hitters. So I think that they'll be able to hit driver in spots, and the longer hitters will have their option of trying to take on more. I mean, from my understanding, so par 72, 7,200 yards, that's going to skew on the shorter side of par 72s. My understanding is that this is a golf course that has not seen a lot of rain so far this summer. It's pretty firm. It's pretty fast. They can bake it out a little bit. The rough will be long, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily thick. Which is a little bit different. So I think you're going to see very little defense out there outside of maybe some of these green complexes. So I think that you're going to end up seeing already, and I've only gone through the par 4s, like a lot of driver wedge or even a lot of like 3-wood 9.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like not, there's only so many. And the modern player tries to pump it down there a lot further than past years.
Right. And I do think that, and you might have mentioned this just a second ago, I think that brings like everybody into play. And I wonder, Rick, we'll get to the top of the board in a second. I know we need to see the stat profile and all that, but I'm just curious, do you think that sort of minimizes some of the guys at the top because it is kind of one of those where it brings in a lot of the players?
Yeah, of course, right? Like think about the Birdie Fest, think about driver wedge courses, think about who's won those, think about why Jon Rahm doesn't like putting contests, right? The best players in the world don't want it to come down to putting. It's not only the most variable, but it is where, for the most part, those guys are not as good. That's the facts, right? They separate themselves off the tee. They separate themselves on the second shot. They separate themselves from tee to green. So yes, I do think a golf course that I'm seeing in my brain, which could be wrong, is a golf course that opens it up for a lot of people. The other thing, just characteristic wise, the fairways are pretty narrow, but again, I don't think the rough's going to be super penal. They're like 25 yards on average, which is definitely on the skinnier side of things. And then a lot of these holes have a very similar, like, elevated tee box to a lower fairway, and then hitting back up a hill to an elevated green. Like that's like the same kind of concepts that you're going to see often out here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think it's going to turn into a putting. I think it's going to be a wedge fest putting contest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think unless they get wind or really bake it out or really put some of these pins in some weird spots, I think the winning score is like, this is really tough on a golf course we've never seen before, but like 20.
Maybe. I was going to set the over under at like 21.5.
The 5s they're going to demolish the 5s.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to demolish a lot of these 4s.
Yeah.
Like the real defense will be, so 3, 4, 5, 6 is interesting, right? That's 4 straight par 4s, at least 460 yards. Again, it's not crazy, right? I mean, 460 yards is driver 9-iron. The 3s, I just don't know where the defense is on this thing. I think it's going to be beat up pretty good.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We will jump into the cheat sheet and put some names on paper and start talking through the salaries and everything else that goes into it. But first, we are going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
Get breaking news.
Big news coming out of the NFL today.
Highlights and instant reactions.
The largest final round comeback in Tour Championship history. We're down to the Final Four.
I just want to take time to analyze greatness.
Talk winners and losers with a guy who's already a big winner.
CBS Sports HQ. It's all sports all day long.
And we're back. I do want to remind everyone that this Saturday on CBS, one of the most celebrated soccer tournaments in the world is down to just two clubs. Man City meets Inter in the UEFA Champions League final. Our world-class team will be on the pitch, as they say, with live coverage beginning Saturday at 1:30 Eastern on CBS. Go back to that. Go back to that, Troy. Go back to that. This guy on the left here, this long-haired blonde. Is he Norwegian?
Ooh, I honestly have no idea.
Troy will know. His name's like, it starts with an H. It's like Hargard or.
Well then, okay.
Troy says, yes, he is. Holland. Yes, yeah. Haaland. He is like the premier guy. Has Norway been taking over our sporting culture? Is this something that we need to investigate?
He's 22 years old, 3 years junior to Victor Hovland, I believe, who just took down the memorial.
And there's also a tennis player, Casper Ruud, I believe his name is, who's like,
look at you.
Yeah. So they're no longer just a winter sport mecca. They can do the other things well as well. All right, cheat sheet, Troy. Thank you very much. Rory McIlroy, Sam Burns, Terrell Hatton lead the way. 11-5, 10-5, 10-2. Very small $10,000 range, Sia. Certainly with no shortage of question marks. But the man at the top, Rory McIlroy, looking to complete not only a rare three-peat, but probably an unheard of three-peat, 3 consecutive wins over 5 years at 3 different golf courses. That's probably never been done before in a world where Tiger's done everything. So Rory on the cusp of history, if he can pull it off.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's definitely never been done before because it's obviously so rare that you have 3 different courses in 3 consecutive years. That would be amazing. I think what you're going to hear about Rory this entire week is, well, we're looking at wedge play, right? And he hasn't been good with the wedge play, right? So maybe he gets checked off some people's list. But then again, you can make lineups with Rory McIlroy, and the lineups will, in terms of pricing, like you can do that. I don't think Rory's going to be for me in this range. I wonder how you feel on that. There is a 10K guy I like, but I don't think it's going to be Rory this week.
So here's where I'm at. To me, the criticisms of Rory's wedge play are valid. And we saw that in full effect on Sunday at the Memorial. I'm not going to overreact to just one round underneath the spotlight that everybody saw. I would say the other concern that I have is that in 2023, he has been pretty pedestrian with the putter. That is something that we have not talked a lot about. And it's not like he's been bad. It just hasn't been nearly as good as we have seen historically, or at least recently. And I think on this golf course, it's going to really open itself up to having to, like we've talked about, hit your wedges close enough and roll the rock. And it's not long enough to keep anybody out of it. Like it's just, this is not a good combination. Like if we went back to Oak Hill this week, I'd be like, screw it, I'm in on Rory, right? Like I don't care that he didn't play well on Sunday. Like I don't care. It's such a great course that sets up well for him, yada, yada, yada. I just don't think amongst those other things that this is particularly a great spot for him either.
Yeah, there's so many arguments to like for and against Rory this week. I mean, I think one of the ones against is with his game kind of slipping in a couple of areas. Now, granted, he hasn't been bad, but it just hasn't been what people have expected. So you wonder with the US Open on the horizon next week if he's, kind of working on stuff. And maybe that's a narrative that doesn't exist. Maybe I'm just kind of parroting something that we kind of hear from time to time, but it's the putter and the wedge game and the approach play. I mean, he's lost 4 out of the last 5 on approach. Like that's just not very good. With that said, I do think he is a confidence guy. And I do think if he starts to get it rolling, and I don't think this is breaking news, but it wouldn't surprise me if he starts to get it rolling both on the greens and with the approach play, and he just starts like it clicks and he starts dominating. And that's what we see with superstars, whether it's somebody, in the like a Victor Hovland or even a Colin Morikawa who kind of fought back until he had to withdraw in the final round yesterday. So I think he can turn it around and completely boat race this field. But at the same time, I don't think I'm willing to make my investment there.
How about the other two, Sam Burns, Terrell Hatton? Is it an opportunity to grab one of those guys, or do we just want to skip this top tier altogether and start our lineups elsewhere?
Well, it's both actually. So I want to start some of my lineups with Terrell Hatton. The ball striking, interestingly for him, hasn't been like amazing. It's been solid. It's been great. It's the short game that's really coming through for him, along with, pairing that with the ball striking. So I do like Hatton. I do think he can win here. I've done two different types of lineups, and I think this is how people are going to build. They're going to grab a 10K guy and a 9K guy, and then they're just going to go from there. And just for everybody's edification, if you have Tyrrell Hatton and let's say Tommy Fleetwood, you are going to end up with 7,500 and some change left. I think it's 7,550, which isn't bad. If you grab 3 9K guys that are going to be popular, let's say Rose, Fleetwood, and Lowry at 9,600, 9,700, 9,400, that leaves you with 7,100. So before, listen, I like Tyrrell Hatton. I'm not going to be playing Sam Burns, but Rick, I'm curious. How would you rather start your lineup? With a 10K guy that you like and a mid 9K guy with 7,550 left, or with those 3 9K guys, Rose, Fleetwood, and Lowry with 7,100 left?
So if I was playing a single entry, I would not mind being the Burns guy over Hatton and starting there and being different, right? I mean, I like the way Burns sets up with his wedges. He can get hot with the putter. I think he's a little bit riskier. That's fine. If I was building a lot of lineups, I think that more often than not, I would find myself starting in the 9K range and getting some combination of Fitzpatrick, Rose, Fleetwood, Lowry, in most of those, right? Like 2 or 3 of those guys in a lot of lineups and just pile up some win equity. Take my I've identified 1 or 2 golfers a little bit further down the board that I feel a little bit more comfortable with. Take my chances on those and try to pile up win equity. If I'm kind of out on Rory, if I think that Burns is pretty volatile and I think that Hatton's going to be super chalky, this is a pretty easy case to be made to go just start in the 9K.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I definitely think there's going to be some 9K guys that are chalky too, including like literally the 3 guys I mentioned, because it's pretty good price points considering the field. I don't think that your roster is going to be vastly different because you have that trio in your lineup, because I think more than a couple people are going to do that, or at least grab 2 of the 3. But I like the idea of Fitzpatrick and Connors, and there's some contrarian plays. I know we're not at the 9K range, but I'm just talking about roster construction. I just think it's going to be interesting because I think you're going to have those 2 types of construction. I think you should keep that in mind, not just because you shouldn't start your lineup that way, or you should, but what does that leave you with? And what are people going to do with that amount left? I mean, it's usually you can kind of put people in little boxes in terms of what they're going to do with a certain amount of money left in any given tournament. So it's just something to think about.
Here's to put the bow on Sam Burns. I'm usually pretty iffy on the proximity buckets, but when you start piling up similar ranks across adjacent buckets, I think it's pretty clear to say, okay, this guy can hit his wedges pretty well, right? He's top, call it 50-ish, from 50 to 125, 75 to 100, 100 to 125, those kind of shorter iron areas, and he gets a little bit worse on the mid and longer iron areas. So I think there's a path for Burns, but it is interesting. I think not only is it a week of just like pivots, but it's a week of roster construction conversation that I think is going to play a pretty big role in how the outcome happens.
Yeah, and I also think once you get to like the 7K range, just like a lot of other tournaments, there's just a lot of different directions you can go to potentially be different, especially in a field and with a tournament like this. One more thing on Burns that I think is interesting, is that if you are just looking at him from a ball striking standpoint and even like an approach standpoint, it's not great. But what you just pulled up, for those of you that are watching us on YouTube, you just pulled up the wedge play for Sam Burns in particular, and that paints a much different picture given the proximities. I think, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think we're probably talking 40 to 50% of the approach shots are going to come from less than 150 is my guess.
Yeah. I mean, we just kind of went through it quickly. So, remove the 5s. So that's 3 5s. We have 8 of the holes that we kind of said were like the shorter par 4s. So that's 11 out of 17. 3 of the other ones are par 3s. So that's 14. So really, there's like probably 4 par 4s in which you might have to hit like a mid iron or something like that. But I think twice as many you're going to be hitting short irons or wedges into them.
Yeah, and I think that it would surprise some people that the wedge play with Sam Burns is actually, if you're looking at approach globally, you're probably thinking, okay, well, Sam Burns can hit it pretty far. It's the long irons where he's actually excelling, and it's the wedge play where he's not really excelling. And it's literally the opposite of that. So the wedge play actually looks, we're looking at 50 to 125, 100 to 125. Those are all decent numbers, not superior by any means, but it's those longer approaches where he's been really struggling. So it's something to pinpoint for this tournament specifically as it relates to Sam Burns.
Yeah, it is pretty clear. There's kind of two areas, right? He's like top 60 in the shorter proximities and outside the top 100 in the longer ones. 9K range. So this is a lot of the names we've already alluded to, but it's Fitzpatrick, Connors, Rose, Fleetwood, Lowry. Then we get to the curious case of Cam Young, Sahith, Tagala, Matt Kuchar, and that is all. So I think we've already identified there's probably going to be some concentration around the Rose, Fleetwood, Lowry camp, all for good reason, Sia.
Oh yeah, I mean, all for great reason. I like all three, and it's just something you have to consider when you're making your rosters, like how, and you'll see on Wednesday where the ownership lies. I think all three of these guys are going to be pretty popular. Nobody out of control. I think all three will carry like a certain. I'm gonna like ballpark it like 17 to 20-ish% sort of ownership, which isn't like completely out of line, but. Yeah, Rose continues to build off great approach numbers. Really like what I'm seeing from Rose. Fleetwood, bad at the Charles Schwab with the ball striking specifically, but prior to that, like was really good. And he checks all the boxes that I'm looking at: weighted tee to green, weighted approach, weighted off the tee, and he has the short game too. Lowry, I feel like it's going to be like kind of batting practice for him. Like weighted tee to green, weighted approach are amazing for Shane Lowry. I think he's first in the field in both of those over the last 24 rounds. So I like all three. I mean, in terms of like pivots, I think Cam Young is really interesting because now we're at a place where nobody really wants to play Cam Young. I wonder how many people are going to want to play Fitzpatrick or even Tagala. So this is really a range where you really got to consider the pivots and you really got to consider the unknown of this course. And just the idea that some of these guys like Cam Young might be able to rebound. So I kind of like everybody in this 9K range, but if I'm talking like cash game, or if I'm talking like a small tournament or, heads up match or a 50-50, that kind of thing, it's Rose, Fleetwood, and Lowry for me.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I'm probably a little bit more skeptical or worried or concerned or whatever you want to call it for Cam Young and the way that he's been putting and the way that his short game has kind of come together. I'm glad you pointed out what Rose has been up to because his ball striking numbers, especially approach numbers, are significantly better in the last couple of months than we saw for a long period of time. He used to be very, very reliant on the short game. That's no longer the case. How about this one? How about if we think Rose, Fleetwood, Lowry are carrying a lot of ownership in the 9K range, Matt Fitzpatrick, okay, there's this weird thing that happens, Sia, and it's both good and bad, that no matter what it is basically whatever happens on Thursday, barring a win, is what everyone remembers. Mm-hmm. So you get credit. If you say, oh, Justin Suh, he's the man. Well, you get credit for a good call, even though he finished T41, because everyone remembers he went out, got off to a hot start, and he was in the lead after 36 holes, and they might not remember that he finished T41. They just probably figured, he finished near the top of the board. He didn't win. Matt Fitzpatrick's the opposite. Matt Fitzpatrick was horrible on Thursday. And people remember, like, that's what they remember. They will not remember, because he didn't win, that he had the second best score on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and ended up finishing T9, right? Like, there's this weird mental phenomenon that happens seemingly every single week in terms of Thursday being the only thing that people remember.
Well, what's interesting about that, of course it's true, but what's interesting is, like, in the Justin Suh example, and he's been great, by the way, but he had a bad Sunday, and I think most people would sort of write that off. They'd be like, oh, well, everybody's entitled to a bad day. But because Fitzpatrick's happened on Thursday, he's going to get all the hate, because that's like before the cut, right? That's when people are like super worried about their 6 of 6s. So I mean, I think that phenomenon is absolutely true. I do like Fitzpatrick. I wonder, because he's 9,900, if he is in one of those squeeze spots where people are either going to go up to Hatton, or they're just going to go down to the plethora of players. Maybe not Connors at 9,800, because that's a pretty high price for him. But I think Fitzpatrick, and maybe even Connors, even though it's like the whole Canadian narrative, I think those two get squeezed a bit, because people are going to go up to Hatton or higher, of course, or they're going to go down to Rose, Fleetwood, or Lowry. Fitzpatrick
was the second best tee to green player behind Scotty Scheffler over the final 3 rounds. And for the entire tournament, he was like 7th.
Another thing about Matt Fitzpatrick, and I think this is actually kind of keeping me from being hyper confident about him, and it's so silly, but I'm just going to say it out loud anyway. We were at a new course on the PGA Tour for one of these DFS shows. I can't remember which tournament it was, but I believe it might have not have been this calendar year. It might have been the fall swing. And I remember saying to you and Greg at the time, well, because there's such an unknown and we don't have course history, I want a guy who has everything in the bag, all the tools in the bag. We know he can kind of be good off the tee, be good with the ball striking, short game, all that stuff. And I just remember him being really bad in that tournament. I can't remember which one it was. So now I have this like preconceived notion that logic is completely flawed. But I do like Matt Fitzpatrick, especially if he's going to be far less owned than Rose, Fleetwood, and Lowry.
I'm trying to look through and see where that might have been. I don't know where that would have been. Okay, let's continue this conversation. We will look towards the 8K range and go further and find a little bit of value. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
The Portland Thorns fly east for their battle with Orlando Pride. Sunday on CBS Sports Network.
And we're back. The 8K range starts with Keith Mitchell and Benny On, who has just withdrawn. That's Benny On, so don't play him. Adam Hadwin, Adrian Moronk. It goes all the way down to Nick Taylor, Michael Kim. I count 1, 2. Only 2. I thought there were more Canadians in this range. I thought there was like 3 or 4. There are not. There are
3.
Who? Oh, Hadwin, Svensson, Taylor.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's I skipped over Svensson. 3 Canadians in this range, a couple more in the 7K range. All right, what do we want to do here? Because again, we talk about this a little bit, but like this is the clear drop-off point, right? We were just talking about Matt Fitzpatrick, Justin Rose, Tommy Fleetwood. Now we get Adam Svensson, Adam Hadwin, Joseph Brown.
It's a huge drop-off, and that might be, from a roster build standpoint, maybe you want to have 2 8K guys in your lineup because most people won't do that given, what we're seeing with the drop off. And if they go off, like if you have 2 guys that are really successful in this 8K range, you're probably going to be passing a lot of people. And your roster build is just, regardless of who else you take, it's just going to be different. You know that because I think most people, they're not completely skipping over this range necessarily, but I think some people will, for one. And I think to the extent people play this range, just, the average everyday player, I think they're grabbing 1 and moving on. I don't like this range at all. I mean, so I'm going to have to really talk myself into a couple of these guys. I liked Ben On, so there goes that. Yeah. The next guy I had on my list, because I only had 2. Normally, I would say I like Adam Svensson, but there's 2 problems with him. One, I don't love his price. And the thing is, I think because of the Canadian narrative and because he's just been known as a good ball striker, I do think he's going to get some ownership. If I'm wrong, I'm willing to play him, but I think he'll get some. What's interesting about him is the ball striking it's been kind of bad lately.
I hate it when a guy like who is usually very good is horrible at something. That usually takes a long time to rebound. Right. Adam Svensson. And the reason that when Tim Tucker left Bryson DeChambeau's bag and went and caddied for Adam Svensson for a bit is because this dude flushes it. And what he's not doing right now is flushing it, which is always very concerned. I know it is outside the data, but these Canadians put a lot of pressure on themselves for the Canadian Open. I think the last time we had a Canadian win it was like 1954. Like it's just like they take a lot of pride in this. And I hate the added pressure while your game is already not in the shape that I would want it to be in.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I do think Svensson can bounce back and get a hot putter, which he's done lately, and be hot on approach, which he hasn't done lately. But again, unless he's going to be lowly owned, I just have no reason to go to him given his recent form.
All right, there's a couple more interesting ones I need to talk about. Let me just check in. Yeah, so quietly playing some pretty great golf is Joseph Bramlett. Joseph Bramlett now has made 5 of his last 6 cuts. He missed the cut at the Charles Schwab. It was kind of a weird one. T16 at the Memorial where he gained strokes across the board. He's playing much, much better golf, and the dude moves it, right? Like he is no longer just a long drive threat. He has a much more complete game. The path that I would probably go here, Sia, are with a couple more of maybe the unknown entities. I'm drawn to Adrian Moronk. I'm drawn to Nikolai Højgaard. I'm drawn to Ludwig Aberg, who's making his professional debut. So quickly on those guys, Meronk Meronk's a stud. Like, don't get it twisted. Meronk's a stud. He won the Italian Open a couple starts ago. He finished T5 at the KLM Open on the European Tour a couple of weeks ago. Has played a ton on the PGA Tour this year. T14 at the Honda. Like, plays good golf. Højgaard, I believe, is just coming off of a missed cut. Is that true? Yeah, at the Memorial, which is like a bizarre, by far the worst tee to green week of his life. I'm okay for a bounce back. And then Ludwig. So while he's making his professional debut, you will see him a lot. He's now got his tour card through PGA Tour University. So for the rest of this year and all of next year, but he's played the API, finished T24 there. He's played 3 events across the PGA Tour and the European Tour, made cuts in all of those. Like, I would rather, if I'm going to be different in the 8K, I want to be really different and take these like high upside, nobody wants them guys.
Yeah, Aberg's, he's interesting. I don't mind not being early there. He looks like he's cut from chalk, by the way. That's got to be the best profile picture of all time. If you're not watching us on YouTube, what are you doing? Hit the like button too, by the way.
It's pretty
if
good.
You will.
Strong
jawline.
And he is like, I mean, he's a stud. He's a stud.
You're playing him this week.
Listen, I'm not gonna have like 100% of him, but like, he is a very talented golfer who has already played. Like, this is not his first. It's not his first PGA Tour start, right? It's just his first start as professional where he can make some money. So I think it's a little bit different. Yes, I will definitely be overweight on the field of Ludwig.
I mean, T24 at the API is pretty great. Granted, a lot of that was with the putter, but he was, positive in the ball striking department. That's interesting. Another guy that I wanted to ask you about in the 8K range. So I had 2 guys in the 8K range that I was like, all right, I'm going to talk about these guys. One was Ben On, so there goes that. The other one was a Greg DuCharme, maybe Rick Gehman special in Michael Kim. And I don't know if I'm chasing yesterday with Michael Kim or if this is like a sign of stability with him in terms of, hey, his weighted tee to green numbers are pretty good. But the finishing positions are telling me a lot about Michael Kim on the weekend. T6 at the Charles Schwab, 7th outright at the Wells Fargo, 5th at the Puerto Rico Open. And then, of course, just a ton of made cuts in between that. I mean, it's hard to deny this guy at 8K to me.
Yeah, he's been very good in 2023. And it's a lot of cuts made. And then, you love to see that his best finishes are basically his most recent finishes for the most part. And he's doing it in a way that seems super sustainable, right? This is not, he is kind of hard to project and model on because the long-term stuff is garbage. And it's kind of hard to forget, 27 missed cuts in a row or whatever it was for Michael Kim. But like, this is a much better stat profile, and I think it is long enough. I mean, he has gained strokes to the field in like 8 of 9 and has some really good finishes in there. So I think that is just fine to go and play Michael Kim.
And look at this profile. It's very pale. We know what we do with pale profiles.
That's right. The pale play of the week. Okay. Let's continue. The 7s. Names like Brendan Todd, Eric Cole, all the way down to Andrew Novak, Dylan Wu, Lonto Griffin. Lots more options here, Sia. A lot of these guys played Monday to get into the U.S. Open and tried their hand at qualifying, some to different degrees of success than others. But how do we want to go about spending our assets here?
There's so many guys to like here, which is not atypical. I mean, you mentioned Dylan Wu's name at the bottom. I kind of always love playing him. I always think he's underpriced. So that's certainly someone to think about as we pull up his profile. I mean, yeah, the approach play has been pretty solid. The short game has been okay, but I think it's 7K, Rick. I mean, isn't this the classic Dylan Wu? Like, he's just not going to get respect in the market in terms of ownership or pricing.
Yeah, and you can pretty easily write off those 2 back-to-back missed cuts. And also, as we speak, he is on the verge of qualifying for the U.S. Open. He is in round number 2 of the day. He is 9 under in total. He's got a couple of holes left to go. If he can stick there at 9 or maybe get to 10, he's going to be in the U.S. Open. So he's playing well on Monday. Maybe he plays well, carries a little bit of that momentum to Canada and continues it.
That's a little something I like to call the first cut podcast bump. We did it for Victor. You're welcome, Victor. And we're doing it right now for Dylan Wu. But let's start at the top. Speaking of young up and comers, I think Eric Cole at 7,900 makes a lot of sense. Good wedge player, by the way. Weighted approach, as you might expect, also looks pretty good. And I just like his ability to make cuts and his finishing positions in general. A couple guys in the mid range. Sam Stevens, I think, is very interesting. Also a good wedge player. Weighted tee to green, very good. Weighted off the tee, very good. The ball striking can be a little hit or miss, and the putter's been bad. But if you're willing to take a chance on a volatile putter, I think Sam Stevens has some upside at the very least.
Sam Stevens is winning that. He ran away with that U.S. Open qualifier that Dylan Wu's in. It's in Springfield. He played 36 holes of bogey free golf. He went 65, 62, including a 29 on his second 9, I believe, in the second round. So yes, Sam Stevens is feeling it, at least on a Monday.
Yeah, and again, when I look at his profile, to me, he's going to be volatile, but to me, he's the type of guy that could have a nice weekend. And honestly, when you're looking at tournaments, I mean, that's really what you're looking for. You're not looking for the guy that's going to make the cut and then just slowly fade away on Saturday and Sunday. I think Sam Stevens has the potential to make the cut and not fade. Some more names here. Lee Hodges. It's hard to ignore his profile as of late. He's just been playing really well. He's striking it really well. Short game, not so great, but he's made 3 cuts in a row with a T12 last week at the Memorial, and he he didn't have a great day on Sunday, but I think he was +4. But overall, +4 wasn't a horrible day, and his tournament was very good. Few more names. Ben Martin at 7,300. How can you not like Ben Martin? This is the Ben Martin podcast. Wedge play is solid. Weighted tee to green is solid. I like Mark Hubbard. And then 2 guys at the lower range, Rick. Patton Kizzire, who I recently played, and it worked out okay. Good wedge player. He can pile up birdies in bunches, which I really like. And then, of course, our guy. If it wasn't named the Ben Martin podcast, actually, we have a new name of the podcast. It's the Carson Young podcast. 7,100. Speaking of Dylan Wu and guys who the market is just not respecting, at least the pricing market, DraftKings, I think you could have put Carson Young at maybe not 7,600, but you certainly could have put him at 7,400. And nobody would have said that was too expensive. Some people might have said that's a little light for how he's striking it.
You're not going to get any arguments from me. Approach play's been great. Putting's been great. Results are flying in. 4 top 21 finishes in his last 6 starts, playing with confidence. This does not include, again, you mentioned confidence. Like he qualified for the U.S. Open by boat racing a field 2 weeks ago. He's already in. So like the dude's been playing great golf all over the place. Not just what you're seeing on the screen in PGA Tour events, but like put him in any field and he's going to go out there and play well. He is $7,100. That's a bit light. He should be more expensive than that.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some ownership in that, like between that 7,100, or I should say 7K and like 7,300 range, which makes sense because what's going to happen with the roster construction? You're going to have like a couple of 9K guys, if not 3 9K guys, and then people are just going to naturally go down to the low 7K range. And even if they don't do that build, 10K, 9K, like you'll grab 1 8K, and then again, you'll be stuck in the low 7K with a couple of your players. I think Chez Reavie is interesting at 7,100 as well. There's a lot of interesting guys here.
Yeah, I think Young, Dylan Wu, and Eric Cole were the 3. Cole's got 3 top 25s in his last 4 starts, and at a 5th place finish at Mexico a couple starts before that. So he's been playing a lot of golf, but he's been playing a lot of great golf as well. Those are probably my favorites. And I could be convinced to take a flyer on Aaron Cockrell, who is playing his first PGA Tour event in a long time, but his European Tour stuff is awesome. 5 top 21 finishes in a row, including a runner-up finish a couple of weeks ago. So if you like that mold of a golfer where it's like, playing well globally, comes over and tries to stay hot, like that's probably your guy.
Can you pull up Vincent Norman's wedge play numbers? Because from what I was looking at, they didn't look very good. I think he's kind of an up-and-coming guy, but that was one thing that was a watch-out for me.
Yeah, so it's tough.
Yikes.
50 to 125, he's 182nd. 50 to 75, he's 149. 75 to 100, he's 190th. 100 to 125, he's 164. It's not great.
That is an understatement.
He also cannot putt. 158th in putting. Yeah. Mexico's a good spot for him. That's a good spot for him. And he took advantage. T18, awesome. This is probably not a great spot for him.
Yeah, again, I put an emphasis on, I want to boldface just the idea of not just looking at the approach numbers, but specifically the wedge play. Because if you look at his last 4 on approach, they look pretty great. But the proximities that we're kind of dial in on for this one, it's not a good look for him.
$6,000 range. It's Austin Smotherman, Davis Thompson, Kevin Chappell, amongst others, all the way down to a min-priced Mike Weir, Canadian, Andrew Landry, Derek Ernst, who actually, did he just get into this field or just get out of this field? I think he just got into this field. $6,000. So, Sia, how do we want to spend our cheapies here?
We don't. I mean, I really don't want to get into the 6K range if I can help it. I mean, there's a couple names that sort of come to mind. They don't necessarily jump out to me. I mean, I usually like the 6K range. Kevin Chappell is interesting to me. Adam Long is interesting to me. Justin Lauer is interesting to me. Other than that, I mean, Hank Lebioda, I mean, like Lauer, Lebioda, like guys like that, I noticed the wedge game was actually pretty good. But overall, like it's a pretty tough scene here.
It was the Derek Lamely who got in, not Derek Ernst. So I confused those two. Ernst has always been in this field. Okay. How about a little Sam Bennett in our lives? Right now, a professional. Everyone remembers what he did at the Masters as an amateur. T16, played the Memorial last week. First 3 rounds, really, really good. Last round, horrible. I don't know how I feel about that. I usually don't care about that. So he also made the cut at last year's U.S. Open. The kid can play. The kid can play, and now he's a pro making that money. I think he's a ping guy now. That's interesting.
Marty Dow.
Ooh. Marty Dow's interesting. Hold on. What's his price?
6,800, I believe, or 6,900, one of the two.
6,900. Okay. That's interesting. There was somebody else. I can't remember. Who did you say earlier? Lee Biota?
Yeah.
I wanted to pull up his
and Lauer.
And Lauer. Okay, yes. I knew it was okay, a couple else. I wanted to pull up some of these stat profiles here. Knoxville. Jeez. Yeah. Lauer was the other one I wanted to look at. I like Lauer a lot. Okay. Missed the cut to Memorial. Made the cut at Byron Nelson and Charles Schwab. Game's been a little lackluster as of late. Let me pull up the.
I will say this about Lauer, though. It's the wedge. Okay, you're looking at it now. I thought the wedge play was actually decent for him.
It's not great.
Not great. Yeah.
It's not great. What about, where is my guy? Okay. Paul Haley's here. Paul Haley had a kind of a close call as of late, right? He had that 5th place finish at Charles Schwab, but what do you do with this? Like the 6 straight missed cuts. I guess it was 12 strokes gained in the short game categories. I always just catch his name because I always see it up there. It's easy to pop up because it's Paul Haley II. But I guess we can't go back to this. This is clearly a mirage.
Can we look at one more profile that's sure to be really bad?
Oh boy.
Eric Van Rooyen. Because I seem to recall him popping in the wedge play a little bit as well. Listen, if you're going to go back 36, it's not going to pop in any way, shape, or form. But I think maybe recently it's been okay. Okay, that looks pretty good so far.
3 straight missed cuts, played better 2 starts before that. The approach play outside of a horrible loss at Charles Schwab has been actually pretty good. The driver, he's got to get back to this. He's got to get back to being a slightly above average driver. You can do that. You just can't, you can't lose 3 strokes off the tee. You just can't and expect to contend. The rest of this game isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, especially for the price. Just kind of looking to see %. I mean, the 6K range is it's
pretty bad. Chesson Hadley is interesting to me. I kind of have a thing for him. I think he can pop here and there.
Let's see if the fans have given us any 6K names that we can throw in there in the form of strokes gained narratives, which are lineups created and then tweeted in, and we share them on the show if they're good enough. Let's go, Troy. Let's see what we got. Rebecca back at it again. She says, this is an open. Just what else has Canada given to us? Oh, so these look like whether they are inventions or discoveries of Canadians or in Canada, and then connected to golfers. So, for example, 1874, the Terrell Fallon. Alexander Graham Bell was Canadian?
I have to look this one up because I don't think he was, but she might be saying, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's like some nuance here when it comes to the invention itself.
This always sparks like us doing a history lesson at some point, because I never believe anything. Was the telephone invented in Canada? I'll just type that in. Okay. So Alexander Graham Bell, his family emigrated to Canada, but he moved back to the United States, and I believe invented the telephone a couple years later. So I guess there are ties to Canada.
Okay, that'll work.
Medical insulin. Ben on. He has withdrawn, but that is still very good. Electron microscope. The electric wheelchair O'Hare. Nice.
I don't mind Sean O'Hare in the 6K range, by the way.
Wonder Brand. Snedeker. Wonder Bread. You ever have Wonder Bread?
Oh, yeah. Always. Back in the day, for sure.
Canola oil. Eric Cole. That's pretty good. And a special shout out to the 1999 Blockberry pager, Michael Block. You want to play Michael Block this week?
I do not.
Come on. What if he was 4,000? Would you play him?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I would play him. And I would hope my 5 of 6 is just dominant.
Brent Harris says Canada has an abundance of amazing comedic talent. So this is a Canadian comic / PGA Tour player mashup. Oh boy. All right. Dan McElroy. Dan Aykroyd.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Fitzpatrick Moranis.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Joseph Bram Arnett. It's pretty good. Will Arnett. Phil Hart Smotherman.
Shout out News Radio and Saturday Night Live. He was awesome.
Catherine O'Hara. Sean O'Hare. And Marty Short-Laird. Martin Short.
Martin Short will always be funny. Always.
But see, this could have been Martin Short-Laird. Why was it Marty? He goes by Martin.
That's true. Because Marty's more fun. It's more comedy.
I know it's more fun, and I know it's like Party Marty Laird, but the mashup was right there for Brent.
Yeah.
He missed the layup and took a 3-pointer. Or he passed up the layup, took a 3. Did it go in? I think it might have. I like Marty, but
it might have gone
in the mashup. Up for debate. Brent does a good job. Thank you, Brent. Next line. Ryan, the fantasy bunker, says, did you know there are 7 NHL teams located in Canada? Wow.
I didn't know that.
Quick, Troy, take this away.
Oh, no.
Name the 7 Canadian hockey teams.
Oh, no. Calgary.
Flames.
Edmonton.
Oilers.
Toronto.
Maple Leafs.
Ottawa.
Senators.
Oh, man. I feel like I'm on a game show and I'm about to like miss some like super easy ones.
I have one.
Go.
Vancouver.
Ooh, yeah.
Ducks. That's 5. Did you say Edmonton?
Yeah. What am I missing?
Oh, Winnipeg.
Oh, okay.
The Jets. Who are we missing? We got Toronto. We got. Oh, I got it. The Montreal Canadiens.
Oh, we didn't say Montreal. Oh, geez, that's a bad one. Dang.
Tough scene. All right. Thanks, Troy. So Ryan says, Harrison, ND Ottawa Senators. Nice. Adam had Winnipeg Jets. Boom. See what we're doing? I got it. Benny, Toronto Maple Leafs. We are on a roll. Montreal Canadiens Moronk. Perfect. Eric, Vancouver Canucks Royan. Yep. And Doc, Redmonton Oilers. Yep.
That's actually pretty great. And like Sean O'Hare's come up a couple times. EVR just came up again after calling him out. And Doc Redmond, interesting. I'm going to have to go back and I might include them in some low end lineups, those 6K guys.
Oh, John Martin. We go from We go like the IQ necessary to read John Markowski's strokes gained narrative lineups is not an IQ that I possess. These are French phrases in honor of the Canadian Open. French phrases that are somehow going to be mashed up into golfers' names.
Do you want me to try this or no?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't speak. I mean, I took no French classes, but I at least had the chance to read this while you were buying time. Maybe you should take a crack at it.
Scott Piercy Beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, right?
Yes.
I got that one. Benny, bonjour.
Pretty great. This is good.
Adrian, excuse-moi wrong. Parlez-vous français?
That could be Dylan or Brandon. They're both in this one, right?
Gemma Paul Haley.
Je m'appelle Haley.
Okay. Bienve Nunez. Augusto Nunez. God, John. Thank you, John.
For the record, there were a lot of submissions this week, like almost as much as we've ever had. So we usually only do 4. So for those of you that sent submissions, send them next week too, and we'll try to get them on here.
Did you want to play Sam Stevens? He just withdrew.
Oh, ouch. Wait, after qualifying, he withdrew? Interesting.
Well, I qualified for the U.S. Open.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now
Okay.
he's like, well, I'm going to rest now.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
I'll get to L.A. early. I don't need to go to Canada.
I'll tell you what, I was probably going to be a little overweight on him and very disappointed Friday late afternoon. So maybe that's a good thing.
I also think like there will be more of these. So
yeah,
like there's probably no point in starting to make your lineups. Like I think Monday night and Tuesday morning, we're going to know, like the field's going to change a lot because of this. So don't get too attached to all your lineups, especially for guys that are playing in qualifiers right now.
Yeah, agree.
Okay.
By the way, just real quick, interesting names in the upper 7K range that we just didn't talk about. And I just want to point them out. Taylor Pendrith is 7,700. Mav McNeely, who I literally never play, 7,700. And Aaron Wise at 7,800. I just think those are interesting names considering the field and the price.
Okay, fair. Pendrith playing well, and he will not withdraw because Canadian. He will take pride. So he will likely qualify for the U.S. Open. He's playing well right now. All right. Producer Troy does all the hard work behind the scenes. Thank you very much. We'll be back on Tuesday for the mega preview pod for the Canadian Open. Sia Nejad available on Twitter at Sia Nejad. You can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.